Now we come to the most awaited session of the PROACT Pune Conference 2022, the AM Deshpande Oration. I invite Dr. Joy Shankar Jana to take over the proceedings for the next session.
Thank you so much. This is the most awaited moment of ISA Pune City, and we are conducting this oration every year since the time we started PROACT PuneCon. And till now, we have never missed an oration. And for this oration, we have always invited the best faculty to give this oration. And it is an honor for ISA Pune to start with the oration. I request that nobody leaves the hall during the oration lecture. So I invite Dr. Pradnya Bhalerao, Honorary President of ISA Pune, as a chairperson, and it is indeed honor as a President of ISA Pune to confer the oration lecture today. So Dr. Pradnya Bhalerao. Then I invite Dr. Sunita Khedkar, Honorary Secretary of ISA Pune, for organizing this oration, and Dr. Sade sir, who is the President-elect of ISA Maharashtra, for this. So here on, I request Dr. Pradnya to carry on the oration lecture.
I will directly go to the introduction of Dr. Anant Madhav Deshpande. He was a larger-than-life figure, a numero uno among anesthesiologists. He was popularly known as Bala Saheb Deshpande. He was born on the 3rd of September, 1932 in Karad. He graduated from the BJ Government Medical College and did his residency in the Sassoon General Hospitals from 1959 to 1960. He completed his diploma in anesthesia from the Bombay University in 1961, worked in UK for 2 years and achieved his DA London. Later on, he was an honorary associate professor at the BJ Medical College from 1965 to 1970. Got his degree in anesthesiology from the Pune University in 1970. Was an honorary professor thereafter. And after 1996 to 2012, he was a professor emeritus. The only national conference which was held in Pune in 1976 was under his guidance. He was the founder member of the Pune City branch, the founder president of MSCISA, that is the Maharashtra State Chapter of ISA, and the chairman of the Board of Studies. He was always a prominent figure in the state, national, and international anesthesia conferences. And as you can see, many of us got opportunities to present along with him. A pioneer who established the concept of cardiac anesthesia in Pune, he had several distinctions to his credit. He was compassionate, helpful, and strived for the best. And he brought out the best from the ordinary. The AM Deshpande Oration has been held in his memory in the various PROACT conferences which we had to date, and this is the 7th oration. I would like to call upon our orator for today, Dr. Anjali Kusurkar. We would like to pay our respects to Dr. A.M. Deshpande. I request Sade sir and Dr. Sunita Khedkar to come on stage. Now let us begin with the oration. Now I would like to introduce Madam only in brief. She has been an excellent teacher for us all who are here. And she's an academician par excellence. These are the two sentences. And later on, I will be introducing her in detail in the citation. So I request Dr. Anjali Kusurkar to come here and give her oration. The topic of her oration is Reflections through time, lifelong learning.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be here today in my own hometown. Thank you so much, the organizers of this PROACT conference. When I was asked to do this oration, there was no way I could have refused because it was in the memory of somebody that I've always considered to be a father figure in anesthesia. It's not turning. Not, yeah. No, it's not moving. Hey, Babrukan. Yeah. I first met Dr. Deshpande when I was only 7 years old. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right. We had just come to Pune and he was physician to my aunt's family as both families hailed from Karad. Now, I didn't know then that he was an anesthetist, let alone an anesthetist, the topmost anesthetist of Pune. It was only much later that I learned that. And little did I know then that my little footsteps would be following his gigantic ones into the Department of Anesthesia one day, where he was honorary professor of anesthesia. Now, although I didn't have the good fortune of Dr. Deshpande ever actually teaching me anesthesia, he knowingly or unknowingly played a very prominent role in some of the very epochal moments in my own anesthetic career. So I joined anesthesia in 1977. It was not a very sought-after branch for specialization, and girls seemed to favor it more, so we were 6 girls to 1 boy who joined anesthesia. What a sea change there has been in 45 years in every aspect of anesthesia. And today it is one of the most sought-after specializations, especially in the United Kingdom. Yes. And I believe in the BJ Medical College Sassoon Hospital, now the intake is 3-1 in favor of girls. So think about that as well. And worldwide as well, where once they didn't even know that we were doctors. Today, recently, one of my patients said to me that, I believe you're the most important person in theater. And I very quickly assured her, it isn't me, but it's you. And recent events have actually catapulted our specialty into the public eye. The world watched this amazing rescue operation where this young football team was trapped in the flooded caves in Thailand. And it was actually masterminded by the anesthetist cum diver, Dr. Harris from Australia, who devised this ingenious plan of sedating them with ketamine, aprazolam, and atropine, and incremental doses given by non-medical people, the divers. And each child was carried by one diver with a mask fitted to, a tight-fitting mask, connected to a cylinder of air, and through the flooded caves, through narrow channels, to safety. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. Have any of you seen the movie 13 Lives? Hands up. Yeah. If you haven't, I would strongly recommend you see it because it makes you really proud of our specialty. And then the pandemic of 2020, when worldwide anesthetists came to the fore, saving lives in intensive care units, and this is our very own team from Sassoon Hospitals, Pune. You really did us proud. So here was I joining anesthesia in 1977, not having a clue about the specialty, but these, my seniors, held my hand and taught me everything I needed to know about anesthesia. And one in particular led me to this treasure trove, which was our library, and I devoured all the books one after the other, including, of course, the Bible, The Practice of Anesthesia by Wiley. And over time, I got to understand the subject a bit. I got to like it. And then I knew that I had made the right choice. So on to the exit exams, and it seemed but natural that I should join the faculty as a lecturer. Now, the ethos in the department in those days was working hard and helping our trainees achieve their maximum potential. But in addition, we, the staff members, were given administrative responsibilities. And under the guidance of our senior staff members, Madam Mole and all the rest of them, Tobre Madam as well, we gained a lot of leadership qualities as well as organizational skills for which I am ever grateful. Along the way, I also became vice president of the Pune City branch of ISA in 1980, and then I was honorary secretary for 2 years. Tomre Madam was treasurer then. But to me, the high point of my 14 years in the Department of Anesthesia was teaching and interacting with our residents, the registrars, the trainees, the postgraduate students as well. And that is when I realized that teaching is the best form of learning. Because if you are to teach a topic to anyone, especially a set of brilliant students like these, you want to go into the nitty-gritties of the topic so that you're able to answer all the difficult questions that these trainees are likely to put across to you. So these are some of our trainees in those days who were very successful anesthetists all over the world, actually. Now, I don't have all the photographs. I'm sorry for that, because if I did, that would have been a presentation in itself. And then in 1984, Dr. Deshpande led a group of us over to Manila in the Philippines to attend the 8th World Congress of Anesthesiologists. And that is when I got the opportunity to present my first paper at an international conference. I was very fortunate that in the audience listening in to my paper was Professor John Dundee from Queen's University in Belfast. And he seemed to be interested in my presentation and actually came to talk to me afterwards, because my topic was ketamine and he was the authority on intravenous anesthetic agents. And he invited me over to Belfast. Unfortunately, that didn't actually work out then, and sadly, Dr. Dundee fell ill and succumbed to that illness. But I think I was destined to go to Belfast, maybe not then, but 10 years later. Now, what happened was that I always wanted to go over to see how anesthesia was practiced in the Western world. So when I mentioned this to Dr. Deshpande, he arranged for me to go to Belfast as an observer for 6 weeks. Now, at the end of the 6 weeks, they asked me whether I would like to come and work there. So my family and myself thought that this was an offer on a platter that I should not refuse. So I took a sabbatical from Sassoon General Hospitals, and I left Pune to go to Belfast. But what was meant to be a 2-year stint for experience turned out to be a career move for me for personal reasons. So when I first went to Belfast, I worked in 2 hospitals, the Royal Victoria Hospital and the Belfast City Hospital, both affiliated to the Queen's University of Belfast, over there. Now, one of the most prominent alumni of Queen's University was Sir Ivan McGill. Now, who hasn't heard of Sir Ivan McGill? On the right, you see a certificate which was given by the Royal Victoria Hospital to him in 1912, which said that he has administered 1 anesthetic after receiving practical training in anesthesia. And that is all that was required for a doctor to give anesthesia for surgery. Can you believe that? Now, McGill qualified as a surgeon, but he developed an interest in anesthesia. And he devised the first endotracheal tube, which practically has revolutionized anesthesia, and went on to develop a whole lot of other equipment related to endotracheal anesthesia, thoracic and cardiac anesthesia. But it's a little known fact that he had submitted a thesis for MD at the Queen's University of Belfast on endotracheal intubation, and it was rejected on the grounds that it was unlikely to be of any use. Of course, that did not deter him. He went on, he realized that anesthesia needed to be recognized as a separate specialty, so he developed that. He introduced the first diploma in anesthesia. Sorry, I should go back. Okay. And he was also founder member of the Association of Anaesthetists of Great Britain and Ireland. He went on to be knighted, but he never received that MD from Queen's University of Belfast. Now, I went over to the town of Larne, his birthplace, just to take some photographs for all of you. And in front of his house is a plaque which says birthplace of Sir Ivan McGill, world leader and pioneer in the use of anesthetics, medical advisor to the royal family. Another prominent alumnus of Queen's University was Professor Frank Pantridge. Now, he was a cardiologist, and while working at the Royal Victoria Hospital, he noticed that patients who had acute myocardial infarction very often succumbed to their infarction before they could reach the hospital where the defibrillators were located. So he realized that if the treatment could be taken to the patients, more lives would be saved. That's how he went about inventing the first portable defibrillator. And that's the one in the picture on the right. And it was all of 70 kilograms, and it ran on car batteries. But he put it into an ambulance, which became the first cardiac ambulance in the world, forerunner of all cardiac ambulances all the world over. Now, Frank Pantridge has been called the father of emergency medicine and the grandfather of advanced life support. And this is a statue of him along with his portable defibrillator outside the Island Art Center in Lisbon, his town of birth. Now, of course, today the AEDs are really compact and they are all over in public places. And how many lives have been saved, we really do not know. But prominent among those was Lyndon Johnson, the ex-president of the United States, who had collapsed at his daughter's house and was successfully resuscitated. And recently, Fabrice Muamba, the Arsenal footballer who collapsed on the football field, and he was resuscitated successfully after 75 minutes. And this is Eamon McCoy, who is presently a consultant at the Royal Victoria Hospital, and he devised this flexi-tip laryngoscope blade, which very effectively brings an anterior larynx into view, and we have it in all our theaters. I think some of you may have used it here. So a bit about the political scenario in Northern Ireland when I moved over. Now, some of you may be aware that Ireland was also colonized by the British. And like India was divided, it was also divided. And the northern part was left with Britain as Northern Ireland, and the southern part, the Republic of Ireland. So obviously, whenever there is a division of nations, there is likely to be resentment. And so it was in Northern Ireland between the two communities, the Catholic Irish and the Protestant British. And this sort of smoldered for a while, but it reached a peak. And for 30 years, they had massive violence. It was called the Troubles. You've heard about the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. And there would be bombings and killings and a whole lot of violence. Now, when I went over to Northern Ireland, it was still there. And it was not unusual to find the army out in the streets, army and police vehicles patrolling the streets. There would be graffiti on the walls. And this picture on the right, you can get that. This was the hospital accommodation. The top floor was occupied by the army. I lived on the 10th floor. And up overhead, there would be a vigilance helicopter at all times. Now, the IRA had a very peculiar and awful punishment for anybody they thought was a traitor, and that was called kneecapping. They would shoot them in the knees, and these young lads would be brought into A&E and then to theaters to repair those gruesome injuries. I was one evening working in the Belfast City Hospital doing an orthopedic list, and I thought I heard a gunshot not too far outside. And sure enough, a man had been shot dead. He was a security man just outside the hospital. So it was as bad as that. Fortunately, in 1998, with the intervention of Americans, both sides agreed to disarm and hold a coalition government. But not before a massive bomb was planted in the city of Omagh, which killed 29 people and injured 220. Fortunately, after that, we haven't had that kind of violence, and in fact, Northern Ireland is very much on the tourist map of the world. You've been here. So here I was in 1994 in Belfast, and I thought to myself, life seems to be like a game of snakes and ladders, because I had risen to become an associate professor at BJ Medical College, and here I was a registrar in anesthetics. But I actually really enjoyed that period, because my role obviously was supervisory as a faculty. And here I was getting a chance to brush up my skills, give anesthesia without any supervision, because I was a trained trainee. And so the fellowship exams were straightforward enough. And this is Professor Chris Roberts, who was then the president of the Royal College of Anaesthetists. And he has, of course, authored a number of books in anesthesia. And then I went on to be appointed as a consultant at Lagan Valley Hospital. And a few years later, I climbed the ladder and I became head of department. Now, so a couple of interesting incidents from my one and only consultant interview. When I went into the room, there was this panel of interviewers sitting in front. One of them was a representative from the Royal College of Anaesthetists in London, and he had probably been going through my CV, and he announced to the rest of them that she hails from a very prestigious university, Pune University. What a proud moment that was. But further on, one of the other panelists, who happened to be an Indian, decided to grill me, and he demanded to know how our 3 years training to become a consultant in India could possibly compare with the 6 years that were required in the UK. So I very vigorously and confidently told him that, look, the amount, the volume, and the variety of cases that we see in India during those 3 years are more than enough, not only to give us the experience, but the confidence to practice on our own. I think they probably bought that because I was the one selected out of 12 hopefuls. Now, your first impressions always remain with you. After a while, you get used to any new situation. And of course, this was an affluent country which would have the availability of everything with no dearth at all. But some of the things that struck me then, which were different from my practice in India, one was in terms of logistics. Whatever we needed was looked after by the nurses and technicians, so we anesthetists could focus entirely on patient care. I was actually surprised that drugs actually did what they were meant to do at all times, because because I'd got used to muscle relaxants not always working. Regarding drug requirement, I noticed that the Caucasians seem to need relatively higher doses of intravenous anesthetic agents, opiates, and such like. In fact, there was an occasion when a young Indian girl, actually a girl I knew, had a cesarean section under GA. And the consultant wanted to give her morphine for post-op analgesia. So I just cautioned her, I think you should start with a smaller dose. But she refused to listen to me. She gave her 10 milligrams, and the poor girl was unrousable for several hours afterwards. Now, scavenging was an essential part of every hospital construct, and still is. And I found that did make a difference, even in practical terms, because I never felt as tired as I would after a day's work in India. And I believe that was because I wasn't inhaling those trace concentrations of anesthetic vapors and gases. I believe it's still not the norm in India. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah? And it was a great boon to have a dedicated nurse or technician for every anesthetic. The disease spectrum was quite different. Now, at emergencies, we didn't see the Bulgur injuries and the badly conserved acute abdomens with gangrene and peritonitis. But what I did notice was a large incidence of vascular disease, especially leaking thoracic and abdominal aortic aneurysms. And I think this was because of the type of diet that the local population indulged in, which was fried, fatty food. Anesthetic care in those days itself was very holistic, intra, pre, and post-operative. In fact, pre-operative preparation and post-operatively, the emphasis on analgesia. And we would conduct an acute pain round every morning, following up all the patients on epidurals, PCAs, and such like. And the anesthetic specialty, I was very proud to notice, was very well respected by all other specialties, and still is. In fact, one of the obstetric consultants would always introduce us anesthetists to his obstetric patients, saying that he or she is the real doctor. What better acknowledgement can you get? And the quality of nursing care. The NHS quality of nursing care is absolutely exemplary. And I think that makes a lot of difference to patient outcome. So these are some of our nurses. The one thing that took a bit of getting used to was the long winter nights. When going into work, it would be dark. Coming back, it would be dark. And there was one particular morning that I was rushing into work, and I was bleeped by A&E. And I was running, or rather wobbling down the corridor. And I wondered why. When I looked down, I was wearing one black shoe with a 2-inch heel and the other brown one in the windshield. Fortunately, that didn't happen again. Now, how do Indian anaesthetists integrate within the NHS in the UK? There seems to be a perception that Indian anaesthetists do not get the recognition that they would have got in India. So I sent out an informal questionnaire to 11 anaesthetists who had worked in India before coming to the UK. Now, they had worked for a period of 1.5 to 14 years post-MD in India before coming to the UK. And the types of problems faced, 7 out of 11 said that they had faced some sort of racial discrimination, but they said it was subtle, like microaggression. Regarding language, they all spoke English, yet they said 4 out of 11 said that they had some difficulty in understanding the Queen's English. It will probably change to the King's English now. In terms of knowledge, only one very surprisingly said that he or she had not been taught theory to that extent in India. And regarding technical skills, 2 confessed that there were some techniques that they had not been exposed to in India, which they had to learn, which is fair enough, I think. Now, in terms of discrimination, I asked them whether it exists in either of the countries and how it compares, and regarding recognition, whether they got it, and what factors determined it. So, regarding discrimination at work, 45.5% said it was equal in both the countries. Now, this is discrimination on any grounds, not necessarily racial grounds. 18.2% felt it was more in UK, whereas 36.4% felt it was more in India. Regarding performance-related recognition, 1 person said that he or she had never got recognition in the UK. 36.4% felt that they did get recognition as long as they were on par with their local contemporaries. But 54.5% felt that they needed to be better than their local contemporaries in order to be recognized. So obviously, quality does get recognition, clinical excellence does get recognition wherever you're working, whether it's in the private sector or corporate hospital or government hospital. And should we not all be aspiring for clinical excellence rather than just being competent? Not to get awards, accolades, but because we owe it to ourselves and our patients. So how can we achieve clinical excellence? Now, looking back at my own career and my experience in anesthesia, I thought of 8 areas that would contribute towards clinical excellence. And this I've called the 8-fold path to excellence in anesthesia. So we look at these 8 areas one by one. Staying on top of your game. Now, when we qualify as anesthetists, our knowledge is at its peak. Knowledge is power, but in our profession, it is so dynamic, it's ever changing. So we need to keep pace with the advances, not only in our own specialty, but also in allied specialties, because not only it keeps the interest alive, it makes you think, it makes you more credible with your patients as well as your colleagues. And of course, the most important thing, you can adapt that knowledge to your own practice. And that is why CME has been made compulsory, because we cannot be relied upon to do it voluntarily, looks like, right? And there are various avenues for getting the CME. But learning is a two-way process. And unless we are motivated, unless we are receptive, and unless we reflect on what we have learned, it is going to be an exercise in futility. Experiential knowledge is also a very invaluable way of learning your own experience as well as shared experiences, as we have seen in this conference, the PROACT conference, right? But in that situation as well, it is being motivated, being receptive, and being reflective to pick up the learning points and see how it can be adapted to your own practice. Now, why is it that we are considered to be experts at what we do? Why is it that other specialties look upon us if they have a difficult intubation or a difficult venous access? It's because by repetition, by practice, we have become experts. Practice, perfect practice, you add your own little adjustments, nuances to make the technique your own. which is also the reason why we're having subspecialization in anesthesia as well. Because if you focus your area of practice in one particular region, by repetition you're bound to get experts, and that's how you're going to be a safer anesthetist in that area. But on the flip side, if you're not practicing particular technique or an area of anesthesia regularly, you are likely to get de-skilled as well, which is why an occasional pediatric anesthetic by somebody who is not anesthetizing children on a regular basis is not advisable. Also, if you've been away from work, maybe for a period of 6 months, for some reason or the other, when you come back, you do lose some confidence, you can get de-skilled, so there is no harm in that situation to ask for someone to either accompany you or be with you until you get your confidence back. Now, what is ethical practice? Ethical practice is doing what is morally right at all times. So if you're in any dilemma at any time, whether or not to do a certain thing in relation to a patient, the question to ask yourself is, would I do this if the patient was a loved one of mine? Or another question could be, if a loved one of mine was going for an anesthetic, what would I expect from that anesthetist? And all the answers will come pouring in. Right from the preoperative period, you would expect compassion, empathy, that your anesthetist listens to all the questions that your patient has, answers them, and examines your patient thoroughly. So each and every step is important into the intraoperative period, conducting a very safe anesthetic, and into the postoperative period, making sure your patient is comfortable and safe, etc., etc. So every point is important. We should never cut corners, because if you cut corners, those corners are going to come back to haunt you. Not only that, these errors or little omissions and commissions can also add up to a critical incident. So from this point of view also, it is very important. And 3 other points. One is patient confidentiality. That should never be betrayed. Respect for the patient. Never ever pass derisive comments about patient. And last but not the least, medical photography. Be very careful that you follow the rules and regulations with patient consent, and never ever post patients' photographs on social media where their identity can be recognized. Unfortunately, I've seen this happening. Now, patients, they put their trust in us, they put their lives in our trust. And we, wherever we are working, we work in teams. Now, it is important that we all work in harmony as a team in order to give the best care to the patient. So we need to be on the same page. Now, how do we do this? Now, we need to know each team member, what their role is, respect each team member, know their strengths and their weaknesses. Theatre is not a place for any egos or differences. They have to be left outside. Communication is key. We should be able to communicate in a way that that particular person can understand, so be clear and precise, and be always willing to listen to what the other person is going to say. The atmosphere in theatre should be conducive to anyone who has any concerns to be able to raise it, because it is all in the interest of the patient's safety. So if each person is playing their part in tune to the others, it becomes so harmonious. It is like an orchestra playing in tune for the patient. Another important thing that can be done is practices, drills, teaching, simulator training as well, so that it becomes a team building exercise. In our theatres, we were added the WHO checklist, and central to it is the entire team introducing themselves to each other, and then all the patients' checklist is conducted with everybody present, so everyone knows what it is, and everybody is free to raise any concerns they have, all tuned towards patient safety. Now, sometimes things can go wrong. Somebody is supposed to have said that anesthesia is 99% boredom and 1% panic. That must have been a surgeon, right?
Right.
And we were taught during our undergraduate days about watchful expectancy and masterly inactivity. Well, in anesthesia, that should be changed to masterly activity. Because when things go wrong, you have to get your master act into place. You have to become a leader. And how do you become a good leader? Leading by example, of course. So being prepared at all times, being mindfully present, not just physically present with your mind on the WhatsApp, right? Being vigilant so that you spot the earliest warning signs. So you can be proactive. For example, if there's excessive bleeding, put in an extra cannula or check for blood availability, ask for an extra pair of hands. And what are the best extra pair of hands to help you in theaters? Another anesthetist, right? And then, if things do start turning into a crisis, that is the point when a drama starts unfolding where you are the main actor as well as the director. Screen is gone. So basically, you have to play your own role as well as instruct every team member to do whatever they have to do in very clear, precise terms. You have to be watching the patient's vital signs. You have to be aware of the clock that's ticking. You have to keep everybody in the loop. You have to think of plan B, C, so you're multitasking. This is where your training and your experience come to the test, and this is a true test of clinical excellence. I know most of you have been there and done it well. And supposing there has been a critical incident in theaters, what do you do? Patient has recovered well, has moved to ward. What do you do? Just heave a sigh of relief and say, thank God. You do that as well, but this should be an episode for you to learn from. So it's important that there is a debriefing, that the whole team gets together, and it's very good for the anesthetist to take the lead, to bring the team together, because surgeons usually don't have the time. And it's important to recapitulate all the events, pick up what the good points were, and commend the people, because people like to be appreciated, they should be appreciated. And try and find out what could have been done better, whether there were any mistakes, in order to correct yourself, not to blame anyone, so that in case there is such an eventuality again, you are dealing with the situation in a better way. And if you're working alone and you have a problem, and you're not sure, you can't resolve it yourself, then you should turn to your support group for advice. And I think every anesthetist should have an anesthetic buddy, an anesthetist who's a friend, who understands you and whose judgment you trust. So that together you can sort out any problems. And if you don't have that either, it's a good idea to write it down in a diary, look at it critically, see whether there are any learning points, and adapt them to your practice so that you can move on. Now, with social media invading our lives and everybody putting their lives on them, flaunting all their awards and their achievements, it is quite likely that you might feel maybe envious or get an inferiority complex, or even feel you're in competition. Actually, it is good to appreciate, admire, and get inspired. But if it's causing a negative emotion in you, then that is really not the best thing for you. But you have to remember that each one's journey is their own. Each one's situation, their opportunities are different. And if you have to compete with anyone, your competition should be with yourself, to strive to do better and better. And if your patients are happy with the way you're treating them and your results are good, then you are already a winner. And finally, to self-care. Now, ours is a high-demand job. Very often we're working in top gear, which takes a lot of fuel, a lot of battery charge. But luckily, ours is also a specialty where we can have a very good work-life balance, provided we don't overdo it, provided we don't stretch the hours of work. Because we can switch off from our work when we go home and spend that time in a quality way with the family, or looking after your own health and nutrition and diet, exercise, whatever. And very important of all is getting a good night's sleep, because that's when your batteries get recharged and you're ready to take on the next day's work. But sometimes there could be stresses. Work stresses are likely to be there. Maybe the working conditions are not great, or you have friction with somebody, or maybe the remuneration is not good. If there are such problems, you should identify them early and try and sort them out. Because if you let these stresses accumulate, over time, they can have a telling effect on yourself, physically, mentally. You can start feeling fatigued, headaches, tired, fatigue that is, body aches, and maybe even have poor moods or depression, panic attacks, and it might even go over into your performance at work, and you might not feel like going into work. And that complex is called a burnout. And in recent times, it has been noticed that medical professionals, doctors, are thinking of actually leaving the profession altogether, and the commonest cause given is burnout. So try not to reach that level, because there is always help. There are solutions to all these problems, and it's not worth sacrificing your whole career for something that can be corrected. So self-care is very important. And finally, the R word. What is that? Retirement. Ours is one of the professions where there is no mandatory age for retirement. Doctors would love to work. Dr. Bhatia. And we admire you for that. But because functional age doesn't really match chronological age all of the time. But there have been some concerns that some of them may be overdoing it. So it has been suggested that doctors, at later age should have physical tests in addition to their performance tests in the eyes and hearing, and also cognitive testing. Because if somebody is in cognitive decline, you're not likely to know it yourself, and your colleagues are not going to tell you. But the question is, who's going to do these cognitive tests? How are they going to be assessed? So there is a stalemate on that, but it's likely to surface again. But we, anesthetists, we compare ourselves to airline pilots. And airline pilots have a mandatory retirement age of 65. So how are we any different? Do we not also have a best before date? So why is there a taboo against retirement? Is it for monetary reasons? I don't think so, because you'd have earned enough and saved enough. Is it because you can't think of anything else to do? Is it a calling that you feel you're born to be an anesthetist or a doctor? Or is it for the prestige attached to the job? But look at it the other way. You have spent many years working hard. You've earned a life without the burden of having to earn, without the burden and responsibility that goes with our job. And with a bit of luck and longevity, you could get a good 2 or 3 decades of doing something else that you really always wanted to do, leading a quality life of a different style, because there is more to life than anesthetics, believe me. Yeah. So I would say that think about it. There is no fixed age. It is, you will know it yourself when you feel it's time to go. But think about it, prepare for it, and I would say quit while the going is good, quit while you're ahead, quit while people are asking you why, rather than why not. So I did just that. I wasn't planning to retire. I was enjoying the day job. But to be very honest, I wasn't enjoying waking up in the middle of the night and attending emergency calls. And then the pandemic came along. And as we started preparing for this influx of patients, my colleagues said to me that they did not want me to be frontline because I was in a higher age risk group. That is what I felt was a signal for me to pass the baton on to this younger, very competent group of anesthetists. And I did just that. I very seamlessly moved into retirement. And 2 or 3 weeks down the line, I suddenly felt lighter. I felt as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, a weight that I had never been aware of because it gets internalized. It's a weight of responsibility. So here I am exploring all the other different things that life has to offer, ever learning in the University of Lifelong Learning. And now I'm sorry your lunch has been delayed, but I sometimes look upon life as a 3-course meal where the starters are your formative years and your training years that build up your appetite for the next course, which is the main course, which is your career, which should be long and fulfilling. But don't forget there's another course, which is the dessert, which is retirement, which even diabetics can enjoy. So thank you all for a very patient listening. And I wish you all the best.
that was a fantastic oration lecture. Now will ISA Pune City will felicitate our orator. So we just 2 minutes.
This keynote address and A.M. Deshpande oration, which we started in 2016. And these are the two sessions in our PROACT, are very, very crucial sessions. And I think so far, since this is 7th year, which we are doing this keynote address and oration. Sorry for the delay today. Maybe because of some technical issues, first session got delayed, and there were important topics. Let's carry on further process. Thank you so much, coming from all the way from this thing to your hometown. Thank you so much.
I request Dr. Pradnya Bhalerao, Honorary President of ISA Pune, to felicitate our orator for today. I request Dr. Sare sir and Dr. Sunita to join in the celebration. Request Dr. Pradnya Bhalerao to read out the citation.
Respected Dr. Anjali Kusurkar ma'am, we, the Society of Anesthesiologists Pune, feel privileged to present the late Dr. A.M. Deshpande Oration Award and this citation in honor of your enormous contribution to the field of anesthesiology, both in India and the United Kingdom. Madam, you have had a long association with the BJ Medical College and Sassoon General Hospitals, Pune, as an undergraduate, postgraduate, assistant professor, and associate professor. A board ranker in matriculation from Jammu and Kashmir, you have had several firsts to your credit. A gold medalist for diploma in anesthesia and MD anesthesiology. You were honored with the prestigious Dr. Ambadekar Award at the 26th ISA National Conference. Following this, you cleared the prestigious MNAMS, the National Board Examination, with flying colors. You were the pioneer in starting the first plain clinic in BJMC in 1987-88 when it was unheard of in any other institute. After moving on to Belfast in 1994, the training at Belfast City Hospital, you completed your FRCA in 1995 and joined as a consultant at the Legonberry Hospital. You were head of department from 2008 till your retirement on 1st of July 2020. Your commitment to academic excellence is reflected in your contribution to several articles in reputed national and international journals. You were a keen researcher right from the days at the BJ Medical College and were the editor-in-chief of the Medical Journal of Western India. You have been in positions of Vice President and Honorary Secretary of the ISA Pune City branch as well. Madam, as a true teacher and lead faculty member, you have trained anesthesiologists at numerous state, national, and international conferences and workshops as well. You have been a lead clinician in pediatric anesthesia and difficult airway. During the last 4 decades, you have given many practical and thought-provoking orations and presentations at various forums which have benefited young generation of anesthesiologists. Your philosophy and achievement are a true inspiration to us all. We are thankful and appreciate your acceptance of our invitation at the PROACT Pune conference on the 24th September 2022 and delivering the late A.M. Deshpande oration on the topic Reflections Through Lifelong Learning. We feel honored to present to you the citation and the late A.M. Deshpande Sir Oration Award. Thank you.
I request Dr. Sunita to give the vote of thanks for attending this oration.
I would like to thank Dr. Anjali Kusurkar for taking us through her journey and her lifetime experiences, and also our heartfelt gratitude for accepting our invitation and coming for this PROACT conference all the way from the island. Thank you very much, ma'am. Now we will move to the lunch. Lunch time will be 30 minutes. Next session will be start